Hello, my name is Brad Alge, and I'm the academic director of Purdue's Larsen Leaders Academy. And it's not every day you get a chance to sit down one-on-one to interview one of the leading philosophers of our time. In fact, a self-described public philosopher. I'm here with Tom Morris. Dr. Tom Morris, thank you for joining us and speaking with us here at the Larsen Leader Academy today.
Yeah, it's great to be here. You guys do some amazing things, and I'm just really happy to be a small part of it.
Yeah, at the Larsen Leader Academy, we like to sort of go back in time, study historical figures and leaders, great books, great ideas, and certainly philosophy is something I think can help inform us quite a bit. One of the core competencies at the Larsen Leader Academy that we have in our leadership model is humility. Yeah. And what can we learn from philosophy about humility and being a better leader?
You know, it's pretty deep in the philosophical tradition to understand that the opposite of humility, sort of a arrogance, a presumptuousness, a grandiosity, leads to all the wrong things. I mean, the oldest human epic, the story of Gilgamesh, set in 2800 BCE, Gilgamesh was an arrogant leader. He was presumptuous, he was egotistical, he was grandiose. He saw no limits, no laws, no norms that he thought he was limited by, and the people prayed to the gods, help us deal with this guy. That's the way the lack of humility goes across. And then throughout history, Beowulf was a story of a warrior who was the greatest warrior of his time, but had no humility whatsoever. He set himself up for his own demise. So in a book I wrote in 1997 called If Aristotle Ran General Motors, I end the book with what I discovered in the great philosophers was this unusual recipe for greatness in leadership, a balance of the two qualities of humility and nobility together. A sense of nobility, of the greatness of your cause, of the greatness of your people that you're serving, but a sense of your own humility that you're only a part of the picture. You're only a part of a team. At your best as a leader, you partner up with other people to make great things happen. In fact, the Tao Te Ching, a great book of Asian philosophy, has this amazing statement. The ocean is the greatest of all bodies of water because it's lower than all the rest. They empty themselves into it. To me, that's an amazing model for leadership. Yeah. The leader is so humble that people want to join with the leader. They want to help the leader. A top executive in a financial services company came up to me once after a talk in Boston, and he said, "You talked about confidence a lot today." He said, "My problem is this, I'm a really confident guy, but I'm afraid if I express that confidence to my people, they'll think I'm arrogant." Right. And I said, "Well, why don't you do this? Why don't you make it a habit to always ask other people what they think about this, that, challenge, this new process, this new relationship with a client. If you're always asking people what they think, well, arrogant people never do that. So when you express your confidence, they will know you are not one of those guys." He said, "I'd never thought of that before."
Yeah, one of the best advice, in fact, my father mentioned this to me when I was growing up, it's this, you can never get yourself in too much trouble if you frame things in the form of a question.
Yeah, there you go.
Versus an attack or an accusation.
Yeah, or a pronouncement ex cathedra,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, yes. Do you think humility is something people are born with, or can it be developed or evolved?
Yeah, there are basic personality types that seem more congenial to humility. For example, the introvert as distinct from the extrovert. Nonetheless, I think as a virtue, it's the kind of thing that can be developed. Yeah. Whether you're the most gregarious, outgoing person in the world, you can learn to pay attention to others and put others first. You can learn to have a proper sense of self rather than a bloated sense of ego. So I do think that both this humility and nobility can be learned behaviors. We can get better at those things. And often, Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, often castigates himself in his meditations, which was just his daily journal to himself. I got this wrong yesterday, I'm going to try to do it better tomorrow. When people come to executive coaches, and I have a friend who coaches presidents of companies, and he said, they bring me all kinds of problems, personal problems, family problems, their business problems. And after a few years of helping them deal with this problem and that problem, I realized all the problems come out of a lack of self-awareness and a lack of self-management. Mm-hmm. If I can help people be better self-aware and better self-managed, most of the problems won't even come up in the first place. That has to do with humility and nobility too. If we can become self-aware of how those two things are out of balance in our lives, because they usually are for most people, we can rebalance the equation and then prepare the ground for real greatness in leadership.
Yeah. I think a lot of companies put their high potential leaders through leadership development experiences,
Yeah.
rotation programs that are challenging, recognizing that they in fact might fail. In fact, they design failure into the system. And in part, I think, to say, hey, how are you going to deal with humility? Are you going to become more humble in failure? The trick is, how do you do that and not destroy confidence at the same time? And that's a little bit balancing act. You got to kind of you got to have some wins to match some of those losses to kind of get through.
You've put your finger on why so many people come from sports, from athletics of all kinds, into management and leadership positions, because typically they have had their losses along the way, as well as their wins. They've had this sense of humility sort of beaten into them sometimes by their sport, that most sports are in some sense a team sport. Even the sports that don't look like team sports, there's a supporting cast of people in the background, and they learn to depend on these folks. So then when they enter leadership positions, they've got this seed of humility already planted in them. They're going to take their lumps. They're not always going to win. They're going to have to depend on other people. And that's a great formula for entering into interactions with others with a little bit more humility in your spirit.